Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Char Daston, and this is Nashville. For immigrants, becoming a U.S. citizen or permanent resident can take years or even decades, and you generally need a lawyer. Those lawyers see firsthand how the immigration system affects individuals, families, companies, schools, and the entire economy. With President Trump in office promising to deport all undocumented immigrants, we wanted to hear from immigration lawyers about this uncertain time for their clients. We'll start with Linda Rose, who founded the Rose Immigration Law Firm back in 1990. She served immigrant communities here for 35 years. Linda, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Hello.
So, Linda, you've spent your career specializing in business immigration law. So what is that, and how does it differ from the kind of immigration law we've been seeing a lot in the news lately?
Business immigration law is the component of immigration that I think the public doesn't understand. Most people, when they hear the word immigration, they think of people entering the country undocumented or illegally. They think of, mass entries at the border. Business immigration involves bringing workers to the U.S. to fill needed positions. Companies will sponsor professional workers, workers with highly developed skills. And it involves business and work, and that's a lot of what the Rose Immigration Law Firm has done. Now, we have engaged in just about every aspect of immigration.
Yeah, so you've had clients with all sorts of careers. Just give me a list of some of the careers that your clients have had.
Well, let's see. There was we do a lot of work in the music and entertainment industries. You would be surprised at how many of the U.S. country music artists are from foreign countries. We represent musicians from Australia, Canada, Russia.
Russian country artists.
Yes.
That's
yes.
awesome.
Yeah, a Russian bluegrass group was one of my favorite cases.
Oh, that's so cool. But it's not just musicians, right? There's also, people who do computer stuff and...
Yes, we've represented engineers and architects. I guess one of my older cases was it involved a national interest waiver case. And it was for a man from Korea who designed golf courses in the most unexpected places, on the side of a mountain, on cliffs.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was that he was bringing work into the country, which involved engineers, laborers, architects.
That's so interesting. So, Linda, how has your work as an immigration lawyer changed over the 35 years you've been in Nashville?
Well, let's see. In 1990, when I started the firm, there was one full-time immigration attorney practicing in the Nashville area. There were a couple other people who were working part-time or dabbling in immigration. Then when I came and started a full-time business immigration firm, I brought something new to Nashville. I remember going to different law firms and talking to them about what I did, and usually the attorneys and some of the big firms just didn't understand what business immigration could bring to the economy and bring to our state. Things have changed dramatically. When I first came, there was a small Hispanic community, and of course that has expanded tremendously over the years. And I think that Nashville has become an ethnic mixture, representing people from all over the world, different cultures and different languages. So that has expanded incredibly.
Right. I know the immigrant community has grown a lot, even over the past few years. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm Char Daston. We're talking with Linda Rose, founder of Rose Law Firm, who's been an immigration lawyer in Nashville for 35 years. Now, I want to bring in Doug Russo, co-owner of Rose Law Firm. Doug, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Doug, one group of immigrants that we've seen the Trump administration target is students who are here legally, who have student visas or sometimes even permanent residency, but who have spoken up in favor of Palestine and Palestinians. Now, some of your clients are students. Have they been worried about this? And what advice do you give them?
Well, it's been a hot issue, even in addition to Palestine, because a lot of F1 students who had been studying in school, they suddenly got their F1 status terminated without notice. And I think it was thousands of students. And what the government ended up doing was just seeing if they had any sort of criminal charge ever in their background, not necessarily a conviction, and they revoked their what they call SEVIS record. So that was completely unexpected, completely unannounced, extremely disruptive to the students and their lives. And fortunately, there was a lot of pushback on that, a lot of lawsuits and some successes where the government has backed off on that and has reinstated those student status.
Right. Did that happen to any of your clients?
We had quite a few inquiries on that, and we did start to pursue some cases, but fortunately, they were reinstated by the government before we had to do anything. But yeah, I mean, it was those few weeks when that was happening were extremely chaotic for the students, and we were getting a very high volume of inquiries on that topic.
So I understand, though, that when they, contacted you, whether their records had been deleted or not, or they were just worried, that you had to ask them questions that you've never had to ask your clients before, right?
Yeah, I mean, typically students that are here in the United States, they're law-abiding. They might be active in campus activities or demonstrations. And typically, I wouldn't think that if some, foreign national student is participating in a demonstration, whatever the topic is, that it would impact, their student status. So I've been asking them things now like, hey, what is on your social media? Regardless of, the popularity or not of, difficult political issues like Palestine, what is on your social media? Have you been active in that? Have you been writing op-eds? Have you been doing those kind of things? And it's really just for me to be able to make a risk assessment on what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that freedom of speech applies to everyone. It applies to foreign students. And if the actions of the Trump administration are scaring foreign students from coming to the U.S., that would be a travesty. Foreign students bring billions of dollars into this country each year. And so it would be a major loss to our economy, to universities, if students are dissuaded from coming to America to study.
Now, in addition to students, we've heard from Linda that many of your clients at Rose Law Firm are musicians. So I understand that part of helping musicians get visas to work in this country, you have to prove that they are exceptionally talented. So I want to know, how do you prove to the government that a musician is exceptionally talented? Doug, we'll start with you.
Sure. And unfortunately, I tell clients all this all the time. It has nothing to do with talent. It really has to do with, can you check these boxes that the government has put together for classifying somebody as of extraordinary ability. And overall extraordinary ability means that they're substantially better than most artists. They prove that through meeting at least 3 criteria or having a significant national or international nomination or award. So if they have a, let's say, Canadian Country Music Association award, then that almost gets them in the door automatically on an O1. Otherwise, we have to show who have they performed with. Have they performed with other major artists? Have they performed at major festivals? Have they earned a lot of money at, gigs or whatever they're doing? And those are the kind of factors. Have they been featured in professional publications about the industry and things like that. So we take a look at their history as an artist, take a look at their accomplishments, and then say, based on that, can we prove those criteria? And I will say this, the regulations have not changed in quite some time, but the application of the regulations is very fluid.
Yeah.
And for such a subjective standard like extraordinary ability, we never really know exactly where the bar is.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, has that gotten harder, under the Trump administration? And, how has that bar gotten higher, if so?
Yeah, so if USCIS is not happy with the evidence that we've put forth, they will issue something called a request for evidence. And it's basically asking for additional evidence, saying what you submitted initially was insufficient. We have seen a significant uptick in RFEs, particularly for artist cases lately. And some of the nature of some of those requests are not consistent with, the history of our practice. And it's almost like they are stretching the regulations or making them more strict than what they should be.
Right.
The visa category for artists of extraordinary ability is the most common one that we do, but there are other ways that musicians and artists can come into the country, and we've represented a lot of artists who perform music and art that represents their cultural background, and that's called it's a P3 visa category, so it's a sort of a culturally unique visa. We just put on the plane yesterday an African dance troupe that we represent. They came to the U.S., toured the country, and played African music and drumming and dance, and just returned to Ghana yesterday afternoon.
Got it. So folks are still coming in, but it sounds like those requests for evidence just slow the process down, right?
I would agree. And for artists, the really strong artists aren't going to have a problem. It's the ones that are maybe a little bit more, they are extraordinary, there's no doubt about that, but they're more on the young stage of their career. And they're the ones that really need legal help, and they're the ones that tend to get pushed down. They're kind of the ones that are right above the bar, and it can make a big difference in terms of timing, but also cost for them.
Right. And, Nashville is one of those places where people come from around the world to grow and make a career as musicians. Now, one of the things that has struck me about the immigrants I've talked with and interviewed is that so many of them have just a really high opinion of the United States. So I want to play a clip from my immigration reporting. I interviewed Luis Cortez. He was brought here without documentation as a kid, and he now owns 4 locations of Red Bicycle Coffee. Now, he was allowed to stay in the U.S. because of a program called DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now, he told me the story of what happened when he first heard about DACA.
And I remember I said, wait a minute, do I qualify? And I didn't, because I never finished high school, because my parents had gone deported and I went to work. So I went and got my GED that same day. As soon as they hadn't even signed the deal yet, or President Obama hadn't even signed it. But I went and got my GED because I said, you know what, if this happens, I'm going to be ready.
So we hear, Luis did everything he could as soon as he heard about DACA, to sign up because he really wanted to stay and build a life here in the U.S. Doug, is that a sentiment you hear often from your clients?
Well, I think the people who do have a path are going to be pursuing whatever path they can. And there's no doubt in my mind that immigrants contribute to the economy and contribute to the nation and really make a difference in our community.
The sad thing about DACA is that Congress has not taken action for the next step, which is to give the people who qualified for DACA a sense of permanence. So that they, but what it did allow is it gave young people an opportunity to work with work authorization, get a driver's license, go to college. Those are 3 important things that were needed to appease or to provide for these young people that had come into the country. And a lot of them aren't young anymore. A lot of them are, full-fledged adults and still waiting on how are they going to stay permanently. There have been a few threats to the program of DACA. We don't know where it's going to go.
And then, Luis, he was fortunate that he had some ability to get a GED and then qualify. There are thousands or millions of people that, despite wanting to get on a legal pathway, just do not have an option whatsoever.
Finally, Linda, we've seen ICE arrest nearly 200 people in South Nashville over the past couple of weeks. So what I wanted to ask is, if President Trump were actually able to fulfill his campaign promise of deporting all undocumented immigrants, how would that affect Nashville?
I think if we had a day without immigrants, that the economy would come to a screeching halt. I mean, look around you. Look at the construction sites. Look at in the restaurants where you eat and the hotels where you stay. We depend on the foreign workforce. And if foreigners were removed from the country, we would not be able to function. The wheels of our economy would stop rolling. And the problem is that if a lot of these people are undocumented, the issue is that we don't have an avenue. There aren't laws that allow them to become documented, to become legal. To me, that's the job of Congress.
Linda Rose is the founder of Rose Immigration Law Firm. Linda, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been great to be here.
Doug, we'll say goodbye for now, but we'll hear from you again in our final segment.
Thank you.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll hear from immigration attorneys who handle humanitarian cases like asylum seekers and refugees. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr & Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Char Daston, and this is Nashville. Today's show is all about what it's like to be an immigration lawyer in 2025. Now, we'll hear from lawyers who focus on humanitarian cases, asylum seekers, refugees, and others who are fleeing violence or hardship in their home country. Joining us now is Aynette Murguia, Assistant Legal Director at the nonprofit Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. And with her are her colleagues Bethany Jackson, Senior Counsel at the organization, and we are also joined by Tessa Lemos-Del Pino, Executive Director of Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. It's great to have you all here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Aynette, I want to start with you. What types of cases does Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors focus on?
Yes. So we focus, like you said, on humanitarian-based cases. And what that means is that we represent individuals who have suffered persecution in the past or violence, victims of crimes who qualify for U visas, victims of trafficking who qualify for T visas. We also do a lot of work with unaccompanied minors who may qualify for SIJS status. We do a lot of work as well with DACA recipients, asylum seekers, and TPS holders.
So I want to bring in some news that happened this week. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen ICE arrest nearly 200 people in South Nashville. Now, yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security released a statement that called everyone who was arrested, quote, criminal illegal aliens. But Mayor Freddie O'Connell said yesterday on this very show that he's worried some of those people were not only didn't have criminal backgrounds, but were here legally and just didn't have their documentation with them when they were picked up. So Tessa, I wanted to ask, what is your reaction to that discrepancy on the facts?
I think Mayor O'Connell's concern is valid. We have heard from some individuals who were in the process of obtaining status, and so we're concerned that there may be folks who got picked up into the sweeps that should not have been part of this. And the other thing to keep in mind is, while they may be called criminals, what I'm curious how they are defining that. I'm curious if it's something like a traffic violation. And I'm also curious in terms of, are they misidentifying their status and then saying that they're a criminal just because of their status?
Yeah. Now, Bethany, I wanted to know, how are your clients reacting to the arrest and to other news around the country about these immigration enforcement actions? What are you hearing from them?
So we are getting a lot of calls from clients who are incredibly afraid. The recent enforcement actions in Nashville in particular have really frightened people. We're hearing folks are keeping their kids home from school, staying home from work. We just heard from one of our colleagues at JFON that a young woman who has permission to be in the United States and has work authorization left a very good job at a downtown restaurant because her supervisor wanted her to work night shift and she was afraid to do that, so she quit her job.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So people really are just hiding out in their homes, some of them.
Yeah, they're scared to leave their homes.
We've even recently heard that the Diocese of Nashville has said that they understand if the membership of their church, if the parishioners are not comfortable going to church.
That's really interesting. Bethany, I want to flip things around and talk about what it's like to be an immigration lawyer. How has it felt to work as an immigration lawyer now compared with other times, even compared with Trump's first term?
So I have been working in the immigration field for about just over 10 years. I've been a lawyer a lot longer, but I've been doing immigration work. So I started out during the Obama administration, lived through the first Trump administration, the Biden administration. Now we're back to Trump. And I would say that this is the most difficult time I've seen for our clients. The uncertainty surrounding what forms of relief are available and, what enforcement looks like. As Tessa mentioned, there are churches that are saying to parishioners, don't worry about coming to church, because under every previous administration, including the previous Trump administration, places like churches, schools, hospitals were safe spaces where immigration enforcement didn't take place. But this Trump administration has done away with that protection.
That's something that I've been hearing a lot, is that traditional rules about immigration and immigration enforcement are kind of out the window, and that's creating just a lot of uncertainty. So in the face of all that uncertainty, people don't know who is more likely to get arrested by ICE. Inette, I wanted to ask you, is there any pattern we can kind of glean about who is getting picked up in ICE's immigration enforcement actions?
I think when this first administration entered office, I believe what we were seeing nationally is that they were targeting specific individuals who might have had a criminal history or previous removal orders. But in general, I think what we've seen is that they're targeting low-hanging fruit individuals who are presenting themselves at ICE check-ins, individuals who have come into contact with law enforcement for, even a minor traffic violation. And it's not the traffic violation that makes them deportable. It's that contact with ICE that does. And then lastly, large-scale ICE enforcement or raids.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we heard before President Trump was inaugurated was that there would be a focus on undocumented people with criminal records. But it sounds like that just isn't necessarily what's happening.
Well, what's particularly disconcerting is that's still the message. And there are a lot, the general public, I think, thinks that this is a public safety concern, that the Trump administration is really going after dangerous criminals and gang members. But, what we saw right here in Tennessee, of the approximately 200 arrests, a high number were characterized as criminals, but that they could be a criminal because they were driving without a license. That's a criminal misdemeanor in Tennessee. And so if you have that on your record, you're technically a criminal. But that's very, very different from, being a murderer, somebody who's committed an aggravated robbery, something like that. And I think, unfortunately, the messaging is that the Trump administration is really focusing on those dangerous criminals when, in fact, they're picking up everybody. And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it also erodes society's feeling of public safety. So, for instance, we've had an individual who reached out for help because they were a survivor of domestic violence, and they had been falsely accused by their abuser. They ended up getting arrested. Charges were quickly dropped, but the person was already in deportation processes. And so you find that people are more reluctant to work with law enforcement, and that makes everyone less safe.
So, Tessa, after these arrests, your organization has teamed up with other partners in Nashville to start what you're calling the Belonging Fund that supports immigrants in times of crisis. So what kinds of support do people need, and what are you planning to help with?
So when somebody is deported, when a member of the family is is being detained or entering deportation processes, you're often losing the source of income. And so some families will need help with rent assistance or groceries or that type of thing. And Conexión Americas is taking the lead on that for us and helping to distribute the funds. And so folks who have somebody who've been detained are able to access these funds.
Yeah. And it sounds like, if people are staying home, getting groceries for those people too is very, very important. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville and I'm Char Daston. We're talking with immigration lawyers today, and our guests are attorneys Bethany Jackson and legal assistant. What is your proper title? Sorry.
Assistant Legal Director.
Assistant Legal Director, Inette Murguia from Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, and Tessa Lemos Del Pino, the organization's director. So we're hearing a lot about immigrants being deported without due process. Most notably, there's the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was deported to El Salvador despite a judge's order that he should stay in this country. So, Inette, when it comes to deportation, what does due process look like?
So it's important to highlight that the U.S. Constitution gives everybody in this country the right to due process, meaning that they have the right to be heard before a judge. And so in immigration proceedings, it's important that the person be able to challenge, their detention, and that the government prove that they do not have the right to be here.
Got it. So a court proceeding is essential.
Yes. And, one of the reasons that this is important, and we've seen the Trump administration talk about this in the context of immigration, but it goes beyond that because when immigrant due process rights are violated, that doesn't necessarily stop, or it doesn't stop them going beyond that and targeting citizens as well.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say, an easy way to think about due process is you're entitled to a day in court. So the government has to prove whatever its case is, and you get the right to contest that. And so, as Inette said, what we're seeing is an erosion of due process rights where this administration is picking people up, putting them on a plane, deporting them or sending them outside of the country to a prison that's not even located in their home country without any opportunity to defend themselves. And the erosion of due process rights for immigrants is not going to be limited to immigrants. Our concern is that it's going to be broader because regardless of your immigration status, we have the same due process rights under the Constitution.
So, the problem in Mr. Abrego Garcia's case and some others' cases is that they weren't given a day in court, a hearing. But, in theory, if people are, as they have been in the past, given court hearings, what are some of the legal tools that you use to protect your clients from deportation? Bethany?
So if you have the opportunity to present your case to a judge, what you're doing is the government is saying that you don't have the right to be in the United States, and you have the chance to explain to the judge why you do have the right to be in the United States, and that's because you qualify for asylum, because you suffered persecution on certain protected grounds like your race or religion in your home country, or because you have a family member that's a U.S. citizen that can petition for you, and you meet certain other criteria. So there are a number of ways that you can defend the charges against you in immigration court. But as you said, as in the case of Abrego Garcia, if you don't have the chance to actually present your case, you don't have any chance of being able to remain safely here.
Now, Bethany, when one of your clients gets deported, what effects does that have on their children, their families, their communities? It's
devastating. As Tessa mentioned earlier, in these immigrant families, they are often the breadwinners in the family. They are, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, children. Families are broken up. The sort of economic stability of the family is disrupted. Sometimes U.S. citizen kids have to leave the United States and rejoin their parents outside of the United States, and it deprives those kids of access to, we have world-class education, health care, all of the things that as U.S. citizens they're entitled to. If the kids end up staying in the United States and they're separated from parents, which is a really devastating thing for families.
Yeah. This wasn't a government deportation, but I remember I interviewed a teacher at one of our public high schools here in Nashville who had a student whose family basically self-deported from Honduras. They thought the situation just is too dangerous here and moved back to their home country. And they took their kid who'd been in school, in the U.S. with them, and she was wondering what if this kid had gotten to finish high school here.
How different his future would have looked. Yeah. And, I think it's important to recognize that the people that are in the United States without documentation are here because they had to leave their home countries. They didn't have economic opportunity. They lived, in poverty. There weren't jobs. There, wasn't safety necessarily. They're not here because they just wanted to pick up and leave everyone and everybody they know and love. They're here because they had to be. And so if you send them back out of the country, even when they have a right to be here, you're sending them back to what they fled from in the first place.
So, Tessa, outside of legal aid for immigrants, one of the things that Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors does is train community members on how they can support immigrants. So what advice are you giving people now who want to help out?
So there's a couple different things. We do some education work around the community. For example, we had the hospitality industry reach out to us because they're concerned about their employee safety and want to know what they can do to protect them. So later on today, our legal director will be meeting with a group of them to just share information and answer questions without giving them direct legal advice, but sort of general information. We just encourage people to, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, stay informed, and have the difficult conversations with family members or friends, and stay curious. We all, as Linda was saying earlier, we all are directly or indirectly impacted by the immigrants in our community by making it better, whether it's food or friendship or whatever it may be. And as long as we can stay open and stay curious and answer and try and pay attention.
Tessa Lemos Del Pino is executive director at the nonprofit Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. Tessa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bethany and Inette will stick with us through the final segment. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what being an immigration lawyer is really like, how it feels to build relationships with clients, and how carrying their worries on your shoulders affects your mental health. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Char Daston, and this is Nashville. Under the Trump administration, immigration enforcement has gotten harsher and harder to predict. How does that change the job of an immigration attorney? And how does it feel to be representing clients who are vulnerable and afraid? Joining us now are Doug Russo, co-owner of Rose Law Firm, plus Aynette Murguia, who is Assistant Legal Director at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, and Bethany Jackson, who is Senior Counsel at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, Aynette, I understand that a big part of the job at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors is getting calls from your clients who are worried and giving them advice. What kinds of questions have your clients been asking lately?
Yes. So I think, one of the big differences that I have seen before this administration took office, I believe I could say, the number one question that I got from my clients is, how can I obtain work authorization? Which as to now is what will happen to me if I come into contact with ICE. So it's a lot more of those questions of how can I prepare myself, what can I do, and what can I do to remain in the United States with my family.
And when people ask these kinds of questions, what advice do you give them? And how is that advice different from, before Trump took office in January?
Yes, it has been very, very challenging. One of the things that has worked, at least for me, is having a one-on-one conversations with clients, because their specific situation might be very different from their family members, their friends. And unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation on social media and a lot of unscrupulous actors who might take advantage of their situation. So it's important that they come to us or another reputable attorney to get legal advice.
Bethany, it can take years for immigration cases to wrap up, or sometimes even decades. What kinds of relationships do you build as a lawyer with clients during that time?
So often you build very close relationships. You see, 14, 15-year-old DACA clients grow up, marry, have children. You see our U visa clients. Those are U visas for people who've been victims of serious crimes, who have cooperated with law enforcement to make our community safer. But that process takes about 10 years now. So we've seen U visa clients, over a period of 10 years, seen their life change, on through getting lawful permanent residence based on their U visas. So it's really you become almost a member of their family in some ways. You see all the graduations, the weddings, the births. So it's one of the joys of the work, honestly.
Yeah. How does it feel when somebody finally gets that U visa?
Incredible. It's what keeps us going.
Right.
The moment that you can say to a client that they're safe is, absolutely amazing for the clients. It's not unusual to have our clients cry when they get that news. And often clients say, I didn't think it was ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug, we talked earlier about how in our immigration system, the outcome is never guaranteed. And in some cases, we've talked about how some employment visas are given out literally by lottery. So how do you deal with the uncertainty of that? And how do you help your clients deal with that uncertainty?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is setting up expectations for the clients and also going through different scenarios. Like if this lottery doesn't happen, then what are your secondary options? And then if there are other secondary options to other secondary options, we can get creative at times, but we can also, just make the client feel comfortable with the options that they have.
So I want to play another clip from my immigration reporting. So I talked to Lucy. She's a U.S. citizen, but her mom was an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. Now, her mom, when I talked to Lucy, had just taken part in one path that undocumented folks can take to legal residency, to go back to Guatemala, her home country, and get a visa from the U.S. Embassy there. And for some undocumented folks, that is their only path to legal residency. It took years for Lucy's mom to get the paperwork in order to make the trip. and she risked getting stuck in Guatemala if something went wrong when she was out of the country. Luckily for the family, things went smoothly and the family was reunited. So here is what Lucy told me about the moment she reunited with her mom at the airport.
Any just, pestering question that I had in the back of my mind, it all just kind of disappeared. Because basically, as soon as I was able to hold my mom, it felt like I've never been given that, strong hug in so long, and I did not want to let go.
So you can hear in her voice the worry that Lucy had been carrying around for all those years. How do your clients' worries weigh on you? Inette, you were nodding. I'll start with you.
Yes. It's hard both as a, legal practitioner and both somebody who is formerly undocumented. That clip resonates a lot. And, Doug and Linda touched on the complexities of immigration law, and the stakes are just a lot higher. And, for me, it's important that I stay up to date with what's going on, but also don't feel overwhelmed and, be present for my clients.
Yeah. Bethany or Doug, any reaction?
Well, I think secondary trauma is definitely something that immigration attorneys have experienced. And even in the business immigration setting, the stakes can be high, even though it's just whether they can work or not in the United States. That still means so much to somebody. Those kind of stakes are just amplified exponentially when you're talking about, the work that people do in terms of deportation defense.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Char Daston. We're talking about what it's like to be an immigration lawyer in 2025 with Bethany Jackson, Senior Counsel for Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, Inette Murguia, also from Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, and Doug Russo from Rose Law Firm. So let's talk a little bit more about this mental health aspect of being an immigration attorney. How do you deal with the stress of worrying about your clients, and how do you keep it from burning you out? Bethany, I'll start with you.
But I mentioned earlier that I've practiced in other areas of law, and one thing that is amazing about the immigration bar is it is incredibly collaborative. It doesn't matter what kind of work you do, whether you do it in a nonprofit organization like ours or in a private firm setting like Doug's. Immigration lawyers are incredibly generous, and in these really tough times, people band together. They share intel about what's going on in terms of enforcement, trends they're seeing in how applications are adjudicated, how immigration judges are handling things. And that's a real source of support to know that you're not alone, to know that you have colleagues out there who have the same commitment to the mission that you do.
Yeah. Inette, as someone who used to be undocumented, are there kind of moments of empathy that you can share with your clients? Or on the flip side, are there things that you can bring to your colleagues who, were not immigrants and say like, hey, this is a really sensitive point for people. Make sure you're careful around that.
Yes, for sure. I think when I have difficult conversations, I think with my clients, I try to resonate with them and my previous experience, traveling, the risks involved with that, the fear of coming into contact with, law enforcement to lead to deportation, that definitely resonates with me. And when we're discussing, cases at work, I think it helps to have input and, see it from a different perspective. We were talking about earlier about the, Tennessee Highway Patrol and ICE raids. And, to us, I know that is state versus local, but for somebody who is undocumented, any sort of authority, even a security guard, it strikes fear.
So one of the things I've heard about from other immigration attorneys is burnout, that there are immigration lawyers who just can't do it anymore. Have you seen some of your colleagues burn out? Bethany, I see you're agreeing.
Yes, that's real. And just because of his historic happenstance, I'll say, Nashville has not traditionally had a large number of immigration lawyers. And that's because the immigration court for our area is in Memphis. So Memphis has a much higher number of immigration lawyers. And during the first administration, Trump administration, we saw the number in Nashville dwindle. And then it sort of came back up again. And now during the second Trump administration, we're seeing immigration lawyers leave the practice, and we're seeing immigration lawyers really curtail the kinds of cases that they're willing to take. So not taking the really tough immigration court or deportation defense cases because it's things are so uncertain and policies change so quickly that it's a huge amount of time to even be able to stay abreast of a lot of things.
Yeah. And do you worry that with, immigration attorneys not doing that kind of work, that folks who are in serious danger of deportation or who are in kind of extreme circumstances might not get legal representation?
Absolutely. I mean, the data is clear that people that don't have legal representation are far less likely to be granted immigration status or immigration relief, and there just simply aren't enough immigration lawyers.
Yeah. I wrote here in my script, is there a sense of purpose that keeps you going? But I kind of want to ask instead, is there a pitch that you give to people who are thinking about becoming immigration lawyers to add new people to the profession? Doug?
Well, I think we all have a lot in common, which is we want to help people. And those people happen to be immigrants. And we have a passion for the immigrant community. And we realize they are humans. They are family members. They are professionals. They are educated. They're also the people who are, necessary for the functioning of our entire economy. So, I think we have that. And then we were talking a little bit before about what keeps us going. I think those wins are kind of the drug that keep us going into the battle is, that feeling of a victory, that feeling of getting somebody the solution that they wanted is really what keeps us going.
Now, for years, we have heard elected officials talking about comprehensive immigration reform, and it has yet to happen. But I want to hear from each of you before we leave today. In just the broadest of terms, what would a better immigration system look like? In our last, 1.5 minutes. Doug, I'll start with you.
Well, I think our current immigration is way too slow. And a lot of that has to do with funding. A lot of it has to do with just the piecemeal categories that we're dealing with. So I think being able to have something that works for the people in terms of I want to apply for something, I have this pathway, and then I can get it within a reasonable period of time. A green card for an employment-based case for somebody born in India should not take 10 plus years. And that's a major problem that we see, that there has really been no proposed solution for that. So something that works for everybody, where there are pathways for everybody, and there are faster adjudications.
Yeah. Inette?
So I think Doug put it very well. Opening pathways, creating more opportunities. Linda was talking about our DACA recipients who are sort of stuck in that cycle, and a more humane approach to it as well.
Bethany, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I agree with everything that Doug and Inette had said. We really just do need to recognize that our immigration system is this patchwork of very old, antiquated laws, and it doesn't recognize the reality of our world where people come and go and move. And so we need to have pathways that recognize that reality in our world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it sounds like more judges, more people who are reviewing these cases to speed up the process, and more pathways to citizenship. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Bethany Jackson is Senior Counsel at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. Inette Murguia is Assistant Legal Director at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. And Doug Russo is co-owner of Rose Immigration Law Firm. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. I produced this episode alongside Josh Deepan. It was directed by Mary Mancini. Our board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Emily Stotts and Jeff Ellis. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcast. The conversation doesn't end here. You can comment and tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500. You can also find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Char Daston. Do something fun today, and we'll be back tomorrow.